And now, it's story time.
What does David Payne really know about the night Madeleine McCann disappeared? Why does his name still send chills and doubts, even after 16 years? Today you will discover that the truth may be much darker and more disturbing than anyone dared to imagine. If you are fascinated by dark mysteries and stories that defy logic, this is the right channel for you. Subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any chapters of our investigations. Together, we will take every step toward the hidden truth. 16 years ago, Madeleine McCann's disappearance remains a dark labyrinth of unanswered questions. You, guardians of mystery, know well. A girl missing from an apparently secure room, conflicting accounts, and a search that never ended. Among all the pieces of this puzzle, one name stands out, surrounded by silence and disturbing suspicions. David Payne. Why have this man's gestures and words made so many uncomfortable? What is it about his behavior that led even close friends to question his presence? And most disturbingly, does he know more than he has ever revealed? Today, we're not going to revisit what has already been said. We're going beyond. We're going to face the facts that have been ignored, the testimonies that have been shelved, and the questions no one dared to ask. Because the truth, my friends, may be even darker than we imagine. David Payne, a respected doctor and close friend of the McCann family, was present on the night everything changed. He was not just a distant acquaintance. David was part of an intimate circle, someone who shared laughs, dinners, and confidences with Kate and Jerry. But over the years, his name has surfaced in contexts that challenged the official narrative. The first suspicions did not start with the police. One of the first voices to cast doubts was that of Katrina Gaspar, a close friend of the couple. Her testimony revealed something so unsettling that many preferred to ignore it. In her statement to the police, she described a disturbing scene during another vacation trip, years before Madeleine disappeared. According to Katrina, David had made comments and gestures considered inappropriate about children, something that made her so uncomfortable that she decided never to allow her daughter to be near him without supervision. Although this testimony did not receive immediate attention, it was added to the case documents. But here's the question: why was such a serious concern practically ignored during the investigations? On the night of May 3rd, 2007, David Payne played an active role. He was frequently seen going back and forth between the apartments, offering help and organizing some of the child checks. At 6:30 p.m. that night, there are records that he visited Kate McCann in the apartment where Madeleine and her siblings were sleeping. Kate always described this interaction as brief and cordial, but some say that the exact chronology of Payne's movements that night was never fully clarified. When Madeleine was reported missing around 10 p.m., it was David Payne who led the initial efforts to organize searches. He seemed tireless, always taking on a leadership role, but at the same time, there was something about his demeanor that caused discomfort in some. One of the most intriguing reports came from a group member who commented years later that David seemed rehearsed when describing what he was doing in the moments leading up to the disappearance. And there's more. In the following days, when the investigation began to deepen, David was questioned by authorities. He cooperated, but his answers were described as too precise, almost calculated. Stranger still, records show that his phone was inactive for several crucial hours in the days leading up to the disappearance. These details may seem small, but it is these gaps, these inconsistencies, that place David Payne at the center of suspicions. And perhaps the most disturbing is David's subsequent behavior. Unlike Kate and Jerry, who struggled to keep the case in the spotlight, David plunged into almost complete silence. But what is hidden behind this silence? Is it a sign of innocence or something much darker? He avoided interviews and was rarely seen alongside the McCanns after the first few months. His gestures, his words, and even his absences raise questions that remain unanswered. What did David really see or hear that night? Why do so many details about him seem shrouded in fog? And does he know something he never dared to reveal? Today, Guardians of Mystery, we look at David Payne not as a secondary figure in this case, but as someone whose actions, and the silence surrounding them may hold the missing pieces to understanding what really happened to Madeleine McCann. When we look at the events of that night, May 3rd, one detail has always stood out: the chronology. Every minute seemed carefully calculated, but over the years, test gaps and inconsistencies have emerged that raise doubts. David Payne, for example, reported going to Kate McCann's apartment around 6:30 p.m. to check on the children. According to him, it was a quick visit. He stated that he found Kate relaxed, talking while taking care of the little ones. But there's something curious about this narrative. Kate's own testimony slightly diverges. She couldn't confirm the exact moment David was in the apartment, and the account seemed vague, as if she herself wasn't entirely sure. This discrepancy may seem insignificant, but for investigators, every detail was crucial. If David was really there at 6:30 p.m., why did Kate seem not to remember clearly? And why are there no additional witnesses to corroborate that specific moment? Another intriguing point arises when we analyze the timings of the child checks that night. The official narrative states that the group, including David, took regular shifts to ensure the children were safe. But there is a temporal gap between 9:05 p.m. when Jerry McCann says he checked on the children and 10 p.m. when Kate sounded the alarm that Madeleine had disappeared. No one seems to remember exactly what David Payne was doing during this critical interval. And then there's the most disconcerting detail: the disappearance. David's phone was inactive for a period of more than 24 hours. This was explained as a technical failure or disinterest in using the device, but it still seemed odd. What could justify this electronic silence at such a sensitive time? Another testimony that has never ceased to cause discomfort was that of Katrina Gaspar. As mentioned earlier, she reported episodes of inappropriate behavior by David on other occasions. But what disturbed investigators the most was how her descriptions seemed to echo what other group members remembered that night: a nervous but strangely contained demeanor. According to reports, while everyone seemed to be in shock, David maintained a calmness that, to some, seemed forced. And there's more. During the first hours of the search, David reportedly insisted on looking near the pool and the external areas of the complex. For those who accompanied him, this choice made sense initially, but when search dogs later indicated signs of something suspicious in those areas, David's insistence on focusing there began to seem less like a coincidence and more like a disturbing possibility. Even more revealing was David's behavior when confronted with inconsistencies in his testimonies. When directly asked about the interval between 9:05 p.m. and 10 p.m., he described his movements with precision, but the details seemed excessively meticulous, as if he were reciting something memorized. This did not go unnoticed by investigators. There is also a point that is often ignored. Why, over the years, did David Payne remain so distant from the center of attention? While Kate and Jerry McCann placed themselves under the spotlight in search of answers, David preferred silence. He rarely spoke publicly about the events of that night, and when he did, his words were carefully measured. And then we come to the most uncomfortable question: why do David Payne's testimonies, although technically precise, seem so full of emotional gaps? Some say his behavior was simply a way of coping with trauma, but others believe this distancing could hide something deeper. As these contradictions accumulate, one question persists: was David Payne just in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is there something he never fully disclosed? Guardians of mystery, we are only beginning to unravel these layers of uncertainty. As the years passed, David Payne's role in Madeleine McCann's disappearance continued to spark theories that divided opinions among investigators, family members, and even public opinion. Some of these possibilities seem plausible, while others rely on circumstantial evidence that, despite being fragile, cannot be ignored. The first theory is the most common among the case's critics. David Payne may have played an indirect but crucial role in Madeleine's disappearance. Those who support this idea often base it on the behaviors described by Katrina Gaspar, which were pointed out as inappropriate on previous occasions. This account generated distrust and led many to question why, even with this information, David remained an active part of the McCann's close circle of friends. In this hypothesis, the lack of a clear explanation for his actions on the night of the disappearance gained strength. For example, what really happened in the apartment at 6:30 p.m. when he said he visited Kate and the children? If this visit was so brief and unimportant, important? Why is it one of the only moments he repeatedly mentioned in his testimonies? Is it possible he was trying to build a narrative to establish an alibi before what was to come? Another line of reasoning positions David Payne as someone who knew more than he revealed, but was not directly involved in the disappearance. This theory relies on the contradictions in the testimonies of the group of friends who were in Praia da Luz. Many believe that over the years, the McCann's close circle may have coordinated accounts to avoid accusations of negligence falling on them, but ended up raising even more doubts in the process. In this narrative, Payne would have critical knowledge about the events of that night, but chose to remain silent to protect himself or even others. His absence from public interviews and his meticulous posture when dealing with the police reinforced the idea that he could be hiding something, even indirectly. The third theory is perhaps the most controversial. David Payne may have had a more direct involvement, and the group, including the McCanns, may have protected his figure from the beginning. This possibility is fueled by behavior that some witnesses described as insensitive or calculated. David, even knowing about the disappearance of a child close to him, remained calm most of the time, as if trying to control the environment around him. For proponents of this hypothesis, this would not just be an emotional defense mechanism, but a deliberate Payne's visits and movements in the days leading up to the disappearance. One of the most significant inconsistencies is his phone being inactive for more than 24 hours, right during the period when preparations for the fateful night would have been happening. The electronic silence raises suspicions. Did he deliberately turn off his phone to avoid tracking, or was it just an unfortunate coincidence? On the other hand, there are those who argue that Payne was, in fact, a victim of the situation and circumstances. For them, the suspicions falling on him would be the result of a sensationalist narrative amplified by the media and Gaspar's testimony, which, despite being disturbing, did not result in formal accusations. In this scenario, David Payne would be just another person dealing with the group's collective guilt and the emotional consequences of Madeleine's disappearance. However, this more benevolent view conflicts with uncomfortable details. For example, why did Payne continue to stay away from the McCann's public initiatives to find their daughter? Why did someone so close, who apparently led the searches that night, disappear from the public debate about the case? Media pressure also played a significant role in building these theories. Tabloids, especially in the United Kingdom, created an environment of constant distrust, but David Payne's silence, instead of dispelling rumors, seemed to fuel them. The public began to interpret his absence as something suggesting guilt, even without concrete evidence pointing to it. Furthermore, Payne's very relationship with the group of friends began to be questioned. Did he benefit from collective protection? Was there a pact of silence among them to prevent new suspicions from falling on anyone in the close circle? And if such a pact existed, what exactly were they trying to protect? For now, each theory carries its own contradictions, and none offers a definitive answer. But at the same time, each detail raises new questions. What does David Payne really know? What did he see that night? And why do so many aspects of his story remain shrouded in mystery? As the pieces of this puzzle don't fit together, the shadow of David Payne continues to hover over one of the greatest enigmas of recent times. Guardians of mystery, there is still much to be revealed or hidden. As the years passed, forgotten details and ignored clues began to resurface, adding layers of doubt and intrigue to David Payne's role in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Among these elements, there is a disturbing discovery, an official document leaked in 2008 containing excerpts from Payne's testimony and observations made by Portuguese investigators. This document revealed something that had not received due attention at the time. According to it, David Payne was extensively questioned about his behavior during the holidays. One particular passage caught the investigators' attention, a moment when he was described as too incisive and direct in answering questions about the timings that night. To the police, his demeanor seemed unusual, especially when pressed about the visit he made to the McCann's apartment at 6:30 p.m. Payne's description of this moment was strangely detailed, almost as if it had been rehearsed, while other simpler details of the night seemed to escape his memory. But it was another piece of this puzzle that shed new light on the case. In 2010, a British investigative journalist accessed a series of anonymous letters sent to Portuguese and British authorities. The letters claimed that someone close to the McCann family was hiding crucial information. One of these letters directly mentioned David Payne, suggesting that he had left the restaurant for a longer longer period than the other group members reported. This revelation, although without official confirmation, brought a new angle to independent investigators. If David really left the restaurant longer than he stated, where was he? And more importantly, why did no one mention this absence? Doubt increased when a local witness, identified only as Mrs. C, revealed to the Portuguese police that between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m., she saw a man walking near the area where the apartments were located. She described the man as nervous, with hurried steps and gestures indicating concern. Although the description was not detailed enough to identify the individual, the location and time coincide with the critical interval of Madeleine's disappearance. Search dogs trained to detect traces of blood and the odor of a corpse also played a role in this turnaround. When they were brought to the McCann's apartment days after the disappearance, the dogs indicated areas near the living room sofa. This detail was already known, but what few noticed at the time was that the police found fabric fibers that did not belong to the furniture. That these fibers could be associated with a piece of clothing described in one of David Payne's testimonies. David himself was questioned about this discovery during interrogations, but denied any relation. He argued that his presence in the apartment was brief and that he had no contact with the family's furniture or belongings at any time. However, the response did not convince the investigators, who noted in their reports that Payne seemed uncomfortable when addressing the subject. The media, always eager for updates on the case, delved into this theory and brought to light a possible connection with Katrina Gaspar's testimony. According to Gaspar's account, Payne had exhibited behaviors that, in retrospect, seemed suspicious. When tabloids disclosed this information, public attention turned once again to him, generating a wave of speculation about what else might be being hidden. But perhaps the most disturbing of all is what was discovered in 2017, when a new analysis of the case was conducted by Scotland Yard. During the review of the files, investigators found a record never before publicly discussed, a call made by David Payne to an unknown number on the afternoon of May 3, 2007. The call, which lasted just over 3 minutes, was made from an area near the complex where the McCann family was staying. When questioned about this call in a subsequent interrogation, Payne stated he did not remember whom he had spoken to. He explained that it could have been an unimportant call, but the lack of details raised even more doubts. Who was he trying to contact, and why was this call never mentioned in the initial testimonies? Another point that caused discomfort was Payne's decision to publicly distance himself from the case after the first few months. While Kate and Jerry McCann were willing to face cameras and interviews, appealing to the public for information, David adopted a more reserved stance, avoiding public statements. To many, this attitude was interpreted as a sign that he preferred not to draw attention to himself. Additionally, a source connected to the investigations revealed that David Payne was cited in other cases involving suspicions of inappropriate behavior even before the holidays in Praia da Luz. Although none of these accusations led to formal charges, they added weight to the suspicions already hovering over him. Even more disconcerting was the analysis of Payne's behavior that night. While the rest of the group seemed disoriented, with uncontrolled emotional reactions, he maintained a calm and methodical posture. Some witnesses described this calmness as admirable, but others interpreted it as cold, almost calculated. These seemingly disconnected details begin to form a broader picture. If David Payne did not play an active role in Madeleine's disappearance, does he know something he didn't tell? And if he does, why does he still remain silent, even so many years later? Stored in police reports, anonymous letters, and contradictory testimonies are fragments of a truth that still defies understanding. Guardians of mystery, while the answers seem increasingly distant, one thing is certain. David Payne's name remains at the center of an enigma that insists on challenging time and logic. After everything we've seen today, Guardians of Mystery, one thing is clear. Madeleine McCann's disappearance remains shrouded in shadows, and David Payne's role raises questions that seem increasingly difficult to answer. Was he just a man in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is there something deeper and more disturbing behind his evasive stance and the contradiction surrounding his name? Silence, my friends, is sometimes louder than any scream. Not all secrets are ready to be revealed, but one thing is certain: the search for the truth does not end here. And as always, Guardians of Mystery, I want to know what you think. Does David Payne know more than he revealed? Or are we just connecting dots that might not exist? Comment below with the phrase, "I am a guardian of truth, so I know you stayed with me until the end of this journey." And if you have suggestions for other mysteries, secrets, or dark stories you'd like to see here on the channel, Be sure to share them in the comments. Who knows, your idea might be the next one to be unwrapped.
In addition, YouTube's algorithm prioritizes videos with many likes and subscriptions. So, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like and subscribe buttons to help more people see and know about this content. Thank you for watching and listening.